Hey guys, I'm Nick, and this is Astral Projection Stories or Astral Projection. Oh no, sorry. No, let me redo that. Hey guys, I'm Nick, and this is Astral Projection Stories or Projections of the Astral. This is my first interview, so I'm still deciding on the channel name.
Too bad you didn't
Today,
buddy better.
yeah, oh yeah, right. I know. I got the champion of astral projection here with me today, Rick.
Okay.
So yeah, I have the privilege of interviewing Rick from Astral Club. Rick is a master in the world of astral projecting. He has been doing it since he was a baby, and he continues to astral project. He has been on thousands of astral projections and has been on countless adventures. He could easily write a book if he wanted to. Rick, like Robert Monroe, is a pioneer in the world of astral projection. He is shining a light, educating, and taking astral projection to the next level in human consciousness with his creations in this space. If you don't know, Rick has a YouTube channel titled Astral Club, where he talks about his experiences and also provides other helpful videos pertaining to things like helping one astral project. He also has a Patreon where you can get access to his Discord channel and access to videos a week before they debut on YouTube. He also provides astral projection lessons where you can sign up and have a one-on-one virtual meeting with him through Skype or whatever he does. But he helps you and coaches you to have your own astral projections. I will have all of his links in the description below if you're interested in checking him out. Rick is an astral projection all-star, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to interview him today. Thank you for being here, Rick. Is there anything I missed or anything you want to add?
Well, thank you, Nick, first of all, for having me as your first, and and for comparing me to my hero, Robert Monroe. I'm in his shadow as far as I'm concerned. He's the master, and all I can do is try my best to open whatever ground I'm able to in astral projection and help students right now that he can no longer do because he passed many years ago now. But if you like, I can get into a little bit of a bio of me, and then we can get into various astral projections, and we can do some questions.
Sure. You want to give yourself a bio?
Sure.
Quick bio, real quick.
Yeah, I
Sure,
think
go
it'll
for it.
help people who haven't heard about me or Astral Club on YouTube to learn a little bit more about my origin story, if you will, kind of like a Marvel movie like that. It's got to have an origin story. Uh, for me, though, it's my memories start with pre-life, before this lifetime. And I have four distinct memories that I've always had, even when I was just a child. And those four are, the first was I was a spirit hovering in Germany, and I knew that I had to select my father. Certain entities, certain souls the opportunity to select their parents. I guess I put in enough time that they granted that to me. And I saw this man, this American soldier, in a German beer garden with three of his friends. And I just liked his intelligence. I liked his gentleness. And his uniform was squared away. That's something to me. And so I just picked him as my father. I knew I was going to follow him home. The next memory, my father was in a bar, and I saw the woman who I wanted to be my mother. I liked her intelligence and how she felt. So I kind of told him, you might say I whispered in his ear, look off to the right. And he did. They locked eyes. The rest is history. The third memory I have pre-life is just visiting my body. My mother was working, and I visited her office just to touch base with the fetus. I wasn't in there all the time. I just kind of would touch base from time to time just to kind of feel if everything was going right. But I did get a glimpse at her where she worked, and years later, I was able to describe to her what her office looked like and where she sat, even though she quit before I was born. That's what they did back in the old days. Women would quit their jobs and then just stay home and take care of the kids in the house. Um, the fourth memory I had was rushing to the hospital. I could feel that I was being born, and I needed to connect with the fetus if I wanted to, have a lifetime. So, but at first I undershot the hospital, and I saw this old man kind of hovering over his body, He was covered with his body was covered with a sheet. And I wanted to help him, but I knew I couldn't because I was being pulled up through the hospital floors. I even remember the glimpses of the hospital floors. Next thing I knew, there was a bright light and a whack on the butt. Back in those days, that's how they got your lungs going, whack on the butt. Now I hear they massage you. If you think about it, a whack is probably a better preparation for this lifetime than a massage. Because you're
Yeah.
going to get
Wait,
more whack.
that's a real thing? They would actually smack
Yeah,
your butt and then boom,
that's how
that
they
jump
got.
starts things?
That's how they used to get you on the go.
Interesting. Wow, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Like I said, it's just a massage now. The next thing I remember is I was either 3 or 4 months old. I was outside. It was the summertime, and I was in my bassinet, just looking up. There's nothing much you could do at that age, looking up, thinking some thoughts. When I saw the spider come down, now to me it looked enormous, but I don't live in Australia or anything, so and I lived in Pennsylvania, so it was just a little nothing spider. It looked big to me though, and I did not like it. Rather than cry, I just reacted by jumping out of my body and hovering above about 50 feet up and looking down. And it's funny, I didn't really feel any emotions about the process. It just seemed natural. I did had a little bit of curiosity though, and I went ahead and went into our apartment, and I saw our little apartment. It wasn't much to talk about, just a couple little rooms and a bathroom and a bedroom. But I remember it clearly, and I was able to describe to my parents years later what their little apartment looked like, even though we moved when I was 11 months old. There's no reason I should have a clear memory at 11 months. But it has something to do with the astral projection end of it. That's where those early memories all come from. The next, of course, I began just to project as a child. My mother would put me to bed, and as soon as I could, I would just kind of roll off into the floor, go out downstairs, sail down the stairs and right through the picture window, and then just go exploring. Now, as a kid, I didn't do fancy things. I'd go down to a playground. I'd go into the school, which I thought was infinitely fascinating, running around the school at night. Um, and I have tablets and tablets as soon as I started learning to write of my little adventures. I read over them today. I'm like, I can't use any of this for a video because it's not interesting, but it was to me. Uh, Now, the thing is I assumed when people talked about dreams, they were also talking about what I was doing. So I didn't think it was strange or weird in any way until I got to school. And I started telling some of my schoolmates about my adventures, and they either called me a weirdo or they said I was lying. So I stopped talking to them. I would still talk to my parents, and they got used to me having these odd stories. I lived in a small town in the 60s, so there just wasn't any information available about astral projection or out of the body experiences. So they just kind of laughed it off as, Rick is a curious guy. But I remember one time when I got a few years older, I heard him whispering about me in the kitchen. And when parents whisper about you, it's never good. And I heard him talking about maybe we should take him to a doctor. And what immediately came to me was, uh-oh, they're going to give me a shot. I did not like shots. So I stopped talking to them. But I continued to project. But as I did so over the next few years, I started worrying that maybe something was wrong with me because I was having these experiences and no one else that I knew seemed to be having them. I think I understand in a very infinitesimal way what it's like to be gay and have that as a major component of your personality that you have to hide. This astral projection for me was a major component that I had to hide and keep safe because I didn't want to end up in some institution somewhere. And I understood as I got older that that would be a possibility, or end up on some psychiatric drug to suppress these delusions. Okay, so I'm glad I kept quiet. Uh, I continued to project. When I was 16, I had a curious projection where I was just sailing down the street when I saw a woman, and at first I just thought she was a sleepwalker. Because I'd see sleepwalkers all the time. These are people who are projecting, but they're not really conscious. So I call them sleepwalkers. But I could tell she was conscious. She looked up at me. So I landed and I said, "Oh, we'll call her Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones, I didn't know you could project." She goes, "Oh, yeah, I've been doing this for years." So I said, "You know what? Let's meet up at the Dunkin' Donuts tomorrow at 4 after my school. We'll compare notes." So she agreed, and sure enough, she showed up at the Dunkin' Donuts at 4, and I was eating my cinnamon bun, and she was ordered a cup of coffee, and we compared notes. And it was very fascinating meeting someone who had experiences anything like mine, because I knew at least I wasn't alone. But we agreed we wouldn't meet after that because a 40-year-old woman, a 16-year-old boy in a small town, there's going to be talk. So we didn't, you know, meet after that. But every now and again, I'd go over to her son's house and I'd look at her. She'd look at me. She'd kind of give me a little wink or something, just so you know. Then when I went to college, there was a signpost that you can leave your body in the student union. I'm not going to mention the group because they're a bit culty, but I met my girlfriend there who was also an experienced projector. So, we were together then for 4 years, and we had several mutual projections together because we were close, notionally, physically, geographically. It was just so much easier to do it than with somebody who was highly experienced. After school, I went into the military as an officer in the Air Force. When that was done, I just went to the Monroe Institute because I was eager to meet my hero, Robert Monroe, and took some courses there. It's a beautiful place. It's in the middle of nowhere, Virginia. It's just lovely, forested paths. It's just beautiful, peaceful, very peaceful. And I took some courses there, and I had one opportunity to talk to Robert Monroe for an hour and a half, just him and I. And he loved to smoke, which wasn't my favorite thing. But look, you allow your heroes to do whatever they want to do. And I just had wonderful conversations with him. He was different than I was. He was very matter of fact. He was very fact based. He was an engineer. He was a businessman. He was a pilot. He was very accomplished, but very very matter of fact type of person. Uh, my experiences were a little bit different from his, and I also shared some of my time travel experiences. I started experimenting with time travel when I was a young teenager. Uh, and you don't read a lot about that in the astral projection uh, books or whatever. There's not a lot of people doing it. So, I mean, I myself, I read that, in a book called Astral Travel by Gavin and Yvonne Frost. It's a bit of a Wiccan type book. I almost didn't buy it. But I saw they talked about going to the future or past for about a page and a half. They didn't say how to do it though, but they said, "Oh, if you go in the past, you really can't affect anything. Can't spend a lot of time there. But as you go far into the future, you can affect things that are physical. You can talk to people who are physical, and you can spend a large amount of time there in certain cases." So, um, it fascinated me, and I started doing travels and experimented for like 6 years till I hit upon a technique to do it. Then I started teaching at Elizabethtown College during the summertime. They would hold these. They used to call them New Age fairs, and I taught astral projection. And they would always give me a small room to start off with, but then I'd cram 50 people in there, and they'd always have to give me another room. I don't know why. I always told them.
Oh, really?
But yeah, it was fun. I loved it. I mean, I'm an introvert by nature. One person called me
Did,
an introvert's introvert. You gonna ask me something?
yeah. Do what was I going to ask you? What was the like success rate of all of those people that you taught? Because it sounds like you taught a lot of people there.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of people corresponding with me by email, giving me their stories, their recommendations, and I've got at least a good amount of them. I shared them once, I think, on a video. It's
Cool.
it's probably somewhere around 85%, I think.
Oh man, that's huge.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
That's awesome.
listen, everybody's different. I can't, one person asked me, "Can you guarantee that I'm going to immediately start projecting?" And I told them honestly, no, I'm not going to lie to you. Everybody's different. I've had people one person just recently sent me an email, told me that he started projecting the night after our lesson. Other people, it took them a few months, sometimes a little more. Everyone's different. All I can do is give you the information, soothe your fears, give you
A
the little
smack on the
sliver of
butt,
what?
smack on the butt, and a good luck at the end of the day, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean,
After you've
everybody's
given them all the
different.
info.
So when they're comfortable, as long as they stay interested in astral projection, I believe they will all eventually do it. But you can't rush people, and they have to do it at their own speed. And so I just provide, the education. And that anyway, that's what I would do at Elizabethtown College. Then my daughter was born, and I decided I was going to invest a lot more time in my career. But I continued to project. Don't get me wrong, and I started having lo- well, if I don't project for a period of time, my subconscious kind of kicks me out because I have it convinced now that these are interesting experiences. And so if I don't consciously intend to project, after a period of time, I'll find myself out. And sometimes I'll be in my bedroom, my current bedroom. Other times I appear in other places that I've lived in that bedroom. I appear in my Allentown bedroom quite a bit. Uh, so there's a certain homing device I think sometimes from astral projection, and you get drawn there. But I continue to do a lot. I'm very fascinated by space and aliens. I mean, I had some.
Yeah, don't you go out to it's either Jupiter or Saturn or something, and you
Saturn's
love
my
listening to
favorite.
the rings? You
Saturn,
love listening to the rings, right? Don't you sit on the rings or something?
yeah, yeah. I mean, the rings, of course, aren't really rings. They're just a lot of meteors, and ice meteors, that kind of thing. And yeah, I like to just perch on one, at least one that's not really tumbling. Some of them are constantly tumbling. That can be fun for a little bit. But yeah, I'll just kind of chill out on a rock, and if you tune in your frequency just right, Saturn is singing to you. It's like a radiation that you hear. It's just this beautiful unearthly music. It kind of reminds me of whale song a little bit. Imagine they were in space, and it's pretty amazing. I
Yeah,
mean, that's
that's amazing.
but I've been, of course, to the moon. I've been to Mars, and I've had several episodes. I talked about what I saw there on Mars. So correct, yes, yeah. So it's fascinating, and I've traveled to the Gray's planet. Went there a number of times in the Zeta Reticuli system. They got the dual sun binary system, and it's correct. It's very warm there, and they like it warm. And I suspect they got a little bit of reptilian to them, and I don't know if they run their own body temperature, but they get it from the heat, which is probably why when you hear about sightings of them, it's usually in the Southwest, and it's always in the summer, because um, I know I was told once by my contact there, who I named Ken because I could pronounce it. Because the name he told me was just way long. Every time, every time they pick a new body, they clone themselves, and then they take their entity, their soul, if you will, into that body. They add another name. So it was long, and I couldn't move my mouth in that way anyway. So I just said Ken, called him Ken. He was fine with it. And
Aren't the Greys, with your experience, you had oh, it was an intense experience of in real life you got into a car wreck or something like that, and it was because of, wasn't it the Greys that you gave too much information pertaining to something that
yeah,
you an astral experience? That was the Greys, right? That were kind of like, hey man, don't
well,
don't talk anymore about it.
I had a number of early experiences with them, and I think I misunderstood them. They're easy to misunderstand because they don't have the emotional component we do. So sometimes people who are examined by them or interact with them feel that they're cold, and then they make them evil. They're not evil. They're just very different from us, but they're curious. And I've had no problem with Ken. But I mean, when I was young, I had a contactee experience. We had a forest behind our house, And I have this clear memory in the middle of the night of just getting up and walking into the forest without shoes on. And there was other kids from the neighborhood there too. We were all filing into this, what I would think is kind of a scout ship. It wasn't huge, but it was enough for us to fit. And then the next thing I remember was being examined, and I was astral projecting. I was hovering above my body, looking down, and other people have had that experience too. So there might be something to do with that experience that causes an astral projection. Uh, and then later on, my family, I have this memory. None of my other family does, though, that we went to this park at night. Now, the park was closed. We got in anyway. Back in those days, they didn't have gates or anything. It was a park. And I remember being woken up in the middle of the night for some reason. And everyone, my dad was like, "We're going in the park." And so we went to the park. Then I remember we stopped and we saw these deer with huge eyes. And we all looked in their eyes and they looked back at us. That's what I remember. And then I don't remember anything. And then we were coming home, and then everybody just went to bed. No one's ever discussed it since then. Curious. It's I think that's what the Greys do. They sometimes change your memory around a little bit so that you don't have a clear memory of what occurred. Because that was a contact experience. We lost a couple of hours there. I mean, we arrived.
And your dad was. You said your dad was there with you.
My whole family was. We all piled into
And
the car.
wow, that's interesting. So and you guys have never talked about it since.
I brought it up once, and
They didn't remember.
I don't think so. I mean, there was a
Wow.
little bit of an emotional reaction. I think it was in denial a little bit.
Yeah.
So
So it's almost like the Greys somehow, some way, put like a veil over that memory
yeah,
for your family.
yeah.
Wow.
So what I remember is deer with huge eyes, just standing there looking at us.
Which
And
was probably them in disguise,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Deer aren't
Yeah.
going to do that. They're not just going to sit there and stare at you. Um, they're very cautious animals. And also, when I remember the day when I woke up, my mom was yelling at us because who tracked all this mud into the house? Because when I walked into the forest, I didn't have shoes on. I just walked out there in my PJs. So, I mean, I didn't share anything about that experience. I also didn't want to be responsible for the footprints, but I think she knew. Um, and the experience that you mentioned was I went into the gray ship when it's in an orbital place between the moon and the Earth. And I went in there, and they were very curious about who I was and what I was doing there. And they tried to talk me into telling them where I lived so that they could come and visit me. And at that point in time, I wasn't really looking for a nighttime visitor, so I just left. Uh, so I was still suspicious of them. It's just I've resolved a lot of that now. They're just misunderstood for the most part, and they don't always handle us gently. It's because they just don't understand the emotions that we experience. Uh, but at any rate, I ended up uh, I stopped doing these Elizabethtown, but I did lessons. People would drive from hundreds of miles around to come to my house. We didn't have this wonderful technology like we have right now. I've had students from all over the world, Australia, the U.S., Canada, European countries, um, you name it. I probably had somebody as a student. So it's wonderful technology. Then in 2019, I went on Reddit and I saw there was a astral projection subreddit, and I was like, wow, I guess people are still interested. And I went ahead and just said, hey, I've been astral projecting now for like 60 years. Do you have any questions? I figured I'd get a few questions and answer them, and that'd be the end of it. About 6 months later, I'd answered about 2,000 questions. And the thing was, is they all seem to be about the same 100 questions. You answer them over and over, and if somebody left me a message or a question, I felt obligated to answer it. And I'd spend hours every night just answering these questions. So I started thinking, you know what? I'm going to make some YouTube videos, post it, and then I'll just refer people to videos. I never really intended to continue on. I started in 2019, and now I'm still doing it. I didn't figure I'd ever get more than 100 subscribers, to be honest with you. I don't have the money, or I do, but I don't want to spend money on advertising. I guess my basic philosophy was if somebody's interested, they're going to find me. So, but you know what? I've continued to do this, and now that I'm retired, of course, my family is my number one. But number two is I want to do this. I want to help educate people who are interested in astral projection to explore their soul, the space time continuum, you name it. So that's my main goal for the rest of my life.
Which in turn is raising the consciousness, wouldn't you say, of the world overall?
In some small way.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're taking the torch. You've taken up the torch that Robert Monroe had, with how much that you've taught and how much you've just filled that space. Wouldn't you say?
I mean, Robert Monroe is a whole nother level above me.
Well, hey, don't sell yourself short. You've done so much, Rick.
Well,
you've done so much.
Thank you.
Would you ever think of creating your own community, or like, how there's the institute where you can actually go and learn how to, the Robert Monroe Institute? Have you ever thought about creating your own kind of institute?
I have
somewhere?
Thought about it, but last time I thought about it was before this type of technology existed. You can only reach so many people even with an institute, but people watch YouTube all over the world, except for places like China where they shut it out, which is unfortunate. But this kind of technology just makes it so much easier to educate people than any physical location is.
That'd be a nice little bonus, though, huh? Wouldn't that be cool?
Oh, yeah.
To kind of make your own community. You could make the style of buildings, you could design the layout and everything, and that'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely it would. I just don't know if it's literally the best investment of my
smartest. Yeah, right.
At
for
this
sure.
stage. I mean, when Monroe built his institute, this technology did not exist, so people had to travel to him. Now they don't even have to leave their home to watch my 400 plus episodes on YouTube.
Yeah. So he's well, that's awesome, Rick. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing all that.
Sure.
So so how are you feeling? How's life going for you?
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I have a certain amount of time left. I mean, I know what time I have left. I'm just going to devote that to astral projection.
Rick, that's so interesting. You say that as if you've found out, you've discovered your death and when it's going to happen.
Yeah, I made the mistake once of wanting to go to where I was interred, and I ended up going to a place that does cremation, which is what I want. And there was a little plaque for me, and it gave my birth and expiration date. So I mean, it's a possible future. Nothing set in stone. But
that's what I was just about to say.
So, with time I have left, I'm going to help.
More than likely, that's probably that's the high. You have the highest odds of that being your future, unless something crazy happens in the meantime that you weren't expecting, or if you deliberately go off course.
I just don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We all have
healthy
dates stamped on us. So.
It reminds me of Big Fish. You ever see that movie, Big Fish?
No, I never have.
He, the kid in there, I can't remember his name, but he's the main character in the story. And he goes, there's, this like haunted house in the neighborhood. He goes up there with a few friends and they go to like knock and run, like ding dong ditch it or something.
Yeah.
And then the witch woman, she opens the door and she shows him how he dies. And then because he knows how he dies, he goes on his life and lives the rest of the movie in a pretty fearless way because he knows. And then, I don't know, it kind of makes up the movie a little bit, but
we still have free will. If I wanted to prove myself wrong, I could walk in the path of a speeding truck. And I guarantee you, things would have changed. Okay? Yeah. We still have free will. It's just, look at it like, if the waves continued on the course that they're currently on, That's when I'll expire. So I'm going to use the amount of time I have left. I'm not really, I mean, I can't say that I'm totally without fear. Sure, I have a little bit of ego, and that ego, wants to hold on to this personality. But, with all my experiences, I'm not afraid that it's the end. It's not. It's just another beginning, really.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Which is one of the magical, amazing things of astral projection. It,
mhm.
it it really changes the outlook on death, and just think of the power that would hold over just human consciousness in
Sure.
general if the whole outlook of death and philosophy behind it changed. So that's a huge positive aspect of,
Yeah.
of
And it also
astral
helps you
projection.
to think about it and think about, like, what are you going to do every day from now on? Are you going to make it count? Because you don't have limitless days, especially if you see what you've got left. So you try to use that to help others to the best of your ability, and stop dwelling on selfish things because they're not going to be around long. It's your time should be much better invested helping others who will then hopefully pass that message on. Uh,
Yeah,
that's
definitely. Right.
that's what I want. That's what I want to happen.
There you go. So it's about. Hey, so one more thing before Robert Monroe. So you look up to him; he's your hero for sure. Didn't you? You tried to meet him in the astral, but you never got to, right? Like for some strange reason, or did you get to meet him?
No, I never met him in the astral. To be honest with
Yeah.
you, I didn't really devote a lot of time to trying to do that. I mean, I met the guy in the physical.
In,
We
in
talked.
physical.
I mean, other than to have a cool story to tell, it just never occurred to me, to be honest. I mean, if I hadn't met
Yeah.
him, maybe I would have tried to do that. But we had a nice long talk, and
Would there, if you had a chance to meet him in the astral, what would you? Was there like a top question you would ask him, or what would you talk about if you had the chance? Or is it whatever?
um, I've read all of his books, and like I said, I had that very in depth talk with him. He tried to talk me into coming into his Explorer program that he was just starting up at that time. Um, and he was getting people who astral project who were good at it, and he tried to send them to certain places, and he would try to do scientific things with it. Unfortunately,
Oh, you would have been perfect for that.
I had just accepted a job hundreds of miles away, so I just couldn't do it, and that was unfortunate. But I, you know what, I think I have a good handle on the man, and I don't see a need to bother him in the astral and interfere with whatever he's doing just to satisfy some small curiosity I might have. I mean, you read his three books, you kind of know the man.
Is it? Yeah, I hear you, Rick. Isn't it so interesting to think about how, like, so that moment in your life where the other job popped up, isn't it so interesting to think, what if that job never popped up and you did take that Explorer program? Would that have had some crazy, drastic butterfly effect on your life,
I'm
or
sure.
maybe more, maybe not? Do you ever think of that kind of stuff with all sorts of different decisions you make and routes you go?
Well, we live in a multiverse. There's millions and millions of different realities out there with different versions of what's going on. And there's just, I try not to think about those kinds of things.
Because it'll drive you crazy, right? It's just too much. It's just kind of stressful, or
Well, yeah, I mean, and it takes you away from dwelling on the one you're in, so you can
yeah.
help people here. Now, I've gone to some different, dimensional situations. One of them was based on a story that Robert Monroe told. Now, this was even before he didn't understand he was going to a different dimension at the time he wrote his book, Journeys Out of the Body. But that's what he was doing. And he saw this alternate world. He had a physical body there that he actually found and interacted with. It was a civilization that didn't have electricity, and their cars weren't the kind of cars that we have. The trains were powered using some sort of nuclear um, boiler, and I was curious about that, and I tried to get there. I got there once, and I got pulled back right away. And then I tried for the next number of decades to get back, and I couldn't because the multiverse is always moving. sometimes you can. It's kind of like from Alice in Wonderland when the Cheshire Cat told Alice that she couldn't get there where she wanted to go from here. And that is true in the multiverse. And I think that plane was out of coincidence with ours until eventually it moved back. And I was able to go there. And I found out that they had a CME just like we did in the early 20s. But they were much
But
further.
sorry, Rick, a CME, did you say?
Oh, coronal mass ejection. It's a
Oh, okay.
huge ball of the sun coming out, and it lights up everything. That's where you get your aurora borealis. It's essentially that they're attacking our atmosphere, and our ozone layer and all the rest of that is trying to screen it out, and we get these colors. This thing was very strong, and we could read books by it when it was happening for like 3 days. Luckily, we weren't that advanced with an electric grid yet. This other reality was, and it blew their whole infrastructure. And then there was religious people who said that that was a judgment from God, and they changed the form of our government. They banned electricity and all of those types of technologies. So they went in a very different course than we did. Now they didn't have a World War I or a World War II either. So I guess maybe they got compensated there a little bit by not having those things. Although France and Germany did have like a 6-month war in that reality. I was able to glean this because when I went there, it was the 100th anniversary. It was like 1923, 2023. It was the 100th anniversary, and people were reading about it and thinking about it. So I scanned some minds, and I was able to get that story as to what happened, because I always wondered how that dimension that he saw lost power. And they didn't have radio, didn't have television. They sure as heck didn't have satellite phones or mobile phones or anything like that.
That's so interesting.
And I even asked people, which world would you rather live in, And I seem to have a split number of people living here or living there. My daughter gave the best answer, though, I think. She said, well, I'd like to live here, but I want a vacation there. All of that.
All the technology. And all that.
She's a projector, too, by the way.
Is she seasoned like you?
No.
Or does she do it as intentionally?
She's not as experienced as I am, or I even was at that age. It's not a big thing for her. It's just something that she's able to do.
It's like it runs in the family a little bit there, huh?
Well, I have a theory on that. I think there is kind of a certain family line, usually from the Celtic area in the world. And people with that DNA seem to be able to project more easily than other people. I believe everybody can project if you're interested enough. But I think those people tend to be, more aligned. And when I look at some of the backgrounds of some people, Robert Monroe, Robert Bruce, Sylvan Muldoon, they all have that Celtic kind of background if you look at their family tree. So that was interesting.
I don't think it runs very strong in my family line, mom or dad's side. It doesn't
mean you can't project.
Maybe one of these days. I know. I believe.
I mean, you can and you will. It's just, I just think that maybe you didn't get the gene. Who knows? But you don't need it. It just makes it easier for you. It's just like in the Olympics. The Kenyans constantly win in the Olympics, in the running events, because they've got long legs. They've got these lungs that were adapted to high elevations, so they use oxygen more efficiently, and they win more races. But that doesn't mean all humans can't run. It just means they're probably not going to get the gold, in a running event in the Olympics.
Hey, Rick, so just to a little slow on the uptake here. So that Robert Monroe world was the sun solar flare basically protruded into our atmosphere to the point
just nuked the grid. It nuked their
that nuked their electricity grid. So they had an electricity infrastructure at that point, or they didn't?
Than us. I mean, everybody had electricity in their 1923. We were just getting started here. Um,
So,
so it
wow. So
brought
that
down
nuke.
everything. It fried everything. And then, like I said, the
Wow.
religious people came in and said it was a judgment from God. And from there, so they didn't even try to restore it.
Wait, so there wasn't 100% empirical proof that that happened, but the religious went the route of saying judgment from God, and the I guess conspiratorial said it was the government intentionally shutting things down. Is that correct? Is
I,
that what you were saying?
I haven't heard that last part. Uh,
Oh, I thought you said. Sorry, I thought you said something
yeah,
about
no, no.
government or something back there.
I don't think that's what we're talking about. It was just strictly considered. I mean, when it happened here in our reality, there were some problems. Some things shorted out and what have you. But people were able to read a book at night with no lights on because of the aurora that were seen in so many places. There, it was worse because they had the grid for everyone had electricity. So it blew and it changed their world overnight, threw them into chaos.
Rick, you said when it happened here in our wait, so we had a similar
Oh, yes.
coronal mass ejection.
Yeah.
Oh wow, of the same magnitude.
I don't think it was of the same magnitude.
Otherwise,
It was
stuff would have
big,
been fried, right?
but I think if we'd have been as advanced as they are, we might have been damaged as severely as they were as well.
Huh.
And
Wow. Yeah.
the Carrington event is another example of a coronal mass ejection. The Carrington event happened in, I think, somewhere around 1857, right around there. And all we had back then was telegraphs. And actually, telegraphs were able to work without being plugged in because of the electricity that was showering into our atmosphere. And it caused fires. A bunch of telegraphs burned up because all that it was overload and it just caused, but you know, that's all we had back then. So, that the only reason we even really worried about it is because we had some telegraphs. But we were pretty primitive. But that was just another example. These things happen on a regular basis. We have the capability to harden all of our infrastructure. We just haven't done it. Now, I know Congress is sat on their hands now a number of times. I mean, we can protect ourselves. It's going to cost a certain amount
Oh,
of money, but
interesting. So very interesting, Rick. So they are aware of the
oh yes,
potential
oh
hazard,
yes.
and they've even discussed it about putting money into that
Mm-hmm.
defense and infrastructure. But it just said that.
Look,
Wow, very
they're going to
interesting.
wait. They're going to wait until we lose electricity. Then they're going to say,
There you
"Oh,
go.
okay, from now on, we're going to do
There
this."
we go.
We
Yeah,
have to
that's a
do all
good
these.
way of dealing with it, right?
Okay, we react to things. We're not, we don't try to plan ahead of time. And
Yeah.
some politician thinks if there was enough politicians thinking they could make money or they could get, more power for themselves by doing this, I'm sure we do it. But right
Right.
now, it's like,
Right.
nobody cares.
Hey, can you hear the fan in the background? Can you hear that?
Yes.
I'm going to, oh, you can? Damn it. I should have turned that off from the beginning. I'm going to turn that off really quick.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. That should be better. Sorry about that.
If you'd like,
All right, Rick,
we can
let's
talk about
jump into, oh, go ahead. I'm
some
sorry, Rick.
projections. We can
Go.
talk about some projections.
Yeah. I have a list of some that I checked out, reviewed a little bit, and just had some questions on.
Okay.
So you had a recent one, Future Life as a Royal Guard.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. So, in your experience here, so like this is the case. Well, wait. Do you think it'd be good? Maybe we'll just give like a super quick rundown to the viewers, just in case they don't
We can
know.
go through it a little
So,
bit. I had
Rick,
a
yeah,
second one that I was going to talk about too. That's going to be airing this Saturday.
Oh, cool, awesome,
So we'll talk a little
awesome.
bit about that too. So it's good. Yeah, I mean it was a future trip. It's about 200 years in this possible future. Remember, possible future. Nothing's engraved in stone. We have free will. And in this possible future, I was able to go into my future self. Now, normally you can't go into another body because imagine a lock. You've got to have the exact key. Okay. Let's just say
Signature.
that I have a key that almost fits. We all probably have experienced that, and the key that almost works. Well, so it's good enough to let me into my future self for a period of time, and depending on how far into the future, I have a certain amount of time and a certain amount of control before I start getting these electric shocks, kind of forcing me out. So I was kind of under a ban a little bit for a stunt I did because people had been begging me to go talk to Jesus or whatever when he was alive. And so after years of saying, I really don't want to do that, I finally said, okay, because like three people in one video were hitting me up on it. And I kind of got in a little bit of trouble because you're kind of not supposed to interact with major historical figures like that.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up later. I got questions about that.
Okay, we'll get into it then. But talking about this Royal U.S. Guard thing, I kind of got around the ban, my punishment, bad. So I was like, okay, whatever. Well, so I tried to, of course, find a way around it. It's kind of the way my mind thinks. And I was able to jump into future selves. That kind of didn't violate the ban. And I found myself in this body, and I was on this bus a couple hundred years in the future. And I was able to access some knowledge. I don't have full knowledge of what his mind is. That takes longer. And I knew I was in the Royal U.S. Guard, and I know that there had been some sort of a major civil war of some sort, and it had been chaotic. There was bodies lying, rotting in the street, and people were starving to death. And some general, took his army and restored order. And then he decided, in order to maintain that order, to make himself emperor. So from then on, there was a Royal U.S. Guard. It was considered a major privilege to be part of that guard. And their job was, of course, to secure his life and his family's lives, as well as hunt down rebels who were trying to overthrow him. And I found myself in this bus that was armored, completely armored, no windows, but there was monitors everywhere, so you could see outside through these monitors. And we got to this old, huge type of tourist complex that had been abandoned long ago. And so we went there to go to sleep. So I found a bunk somewhere, and I started going through this duffel bag I had, and I found some weapons. And one of them,
The pine cone grenade.
yes, one of them I called the pine cone grenade because it kind of looked like a pine cone with these ridges going all around it and these little holes. And there was also a base that you could use where you could fold it up in order to deploy it, I guess. So I've seen grenades before go off in rivers. I won't get into details, but I've seen what happens. It's a good way to go fishing, I suppose. But I used this. So I took this thing outside on this veranda, huge long veranda, and all I could see was my friend Pedro down at the other end with like three female soldiers. He was the Casanova of the bunch, And my personality in this time was very wary around women. So I just decided I'm going to test this thing because there was a river that was like, I don't know, maybe 20 meters away or something. So I turned it one quarter turn to clockwise, and it started beeping, and then it started getting faster. I didn't need to know that that was a good time to get rid of it. So I took it and gave it a Hail Mary pass, and it fell into the river. And then within a few seconds, the entire river erupted. I don't know what kind of explosive was in there, but it came and showered on the veranda. Now, I took off. I immediately went inside. I didn't want to get my guy blamed. And I actually stole a grenade out of my buddy's duffel bag because I didn't want to get my guy blamed. Now, I knew he'd be okay, though, because he had three witnesses that could say that he was not involved in this. So they would just be a mystery as to what happened. And then shortly after that, I got pulled back to my body. The new one that hasn't aired yet, I can share that if you like.
Sure. Sounds good to me.
this time I went back and we were getting on the bus again. And I almost tripped because it's weird when you get into a body and you're not, and it's moving. I did that once. I went into the body of
with
like,
your a Jaguar or something, right?
that's what I
Or
was
was it
going to
a
say. Yeah.
Jaguar? Yeah.
That was another projection where in the future there was a Jaguar running around in America, I guess. And I decided to jump into it while it was running, which was a big mistake because they make it look easy, but it's not. And I just went head over heels, and it really hurt because you experience the pain the body you're in experiences. But luckily,
Especially going that fast.
yeah.
It was probably going so fast too. Yeah.
Well, he wasn't going his top speed, thank God, because I think
Oh,
that would have
okay.
been really bad. But there was no bones broken or anything, just really some bruises I could feel. I felt bad about that, but so when you jump into a moving body, it's a little disconcerting, and I almost tripped over, but I caught myself. I think Pedro was like grabbing me. He said, "Hey, you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he started talking to me. He said, "I know it was you who did that thing with the river." And of course, I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And he goes, "Okay, well, we're gonna have a talk, before when we get back from this mission." So we all loaded onto the bus and started moving. I did him a little favor because there was this woman that I know he liked, and she came and sat next to me. So I bet she kind of liked him, but he was just too inhibited to even talk to her. So I just said, "No, I'm no Casanova, believe me, no ladies man, but I'm better than he is. If nothing, it's just from experience." And so I said to this Gabriella, I said, what did I say? I said, Gabriella, you are looking beautiful and fierce today. And she looked shocked at first. Then she had this huge smile on her face. So evidently it's not unwelcome. So then she just started talking, and I didn't have to say anything after that. She just started talking. Just a wonderful, beautiful woman, and very intelligent. She's just very gentle. So I kind of like went inside, and I was like, "You're welcome, buddy. You can take the ball from here." Uh, so we were driving about 15 minutes, and there was huge explosions, and trees. I could see on a monitor that huge trees had fallen into our path, and other trees fell behind us, so we were trapped. And then we started taking small arms fire. So we looked and we could see that there was rebels out there attacking us because our mission was to find the rebel base. We knew we had some intel on the base that there was some sort of aerial reconnaissance, but we didn't know exactly where it was. Anyway, these stations came down from the ceiling, these combat stations, and there was this interface underneath it. And so I turned over control mostly to him because I knew he knew what to do. But quite frankly, when I was looking in there, it was easy. Some sort of AI was picking out all the targets in his area. Even if they were hiding behind trees, they knew where they were. So within 2 seconds, these plasma bursts came out from the side of the bus and just wiped out all the people who were in his area. And there was other combat stations that did the same. I mean, they didn't stand a chance. It wasn't too smart attacking us there. Uh, and then I heard clear. Someone said clear. So there was a number of doors within the bus that opened up. We didn't all channel out one door, which would be stupid. If you're using something for tactical purposes, you can get wiped out by a machine gun one at a time. So we all came out, checked the bodies. I felt badly about these people being killed, um, but it's not my body. It's not my world. So it's not my job to like change his life. He's got his own course. We checked these people, and they look like they've been stitched right up. I mean, one black spot after another. I mean, they were way dead. And then someone was like, "We got a live one." So we went over there, and this guy evidently had, I guess he'd been lucky, you might say, uh, probably a fraction of a second before the targeting kicked in, he'd turned his head. So the first blow buzzed his head, and he knocked him out. He fell to the ground. So he didn't get hit by any other blast. But when we kind of kicked him awake, you could tell he wasn't so he didn't feel so lucky about being there. And we said, look, you're going to lead us to the rebel base, or we're going to scrap you right here and now. And I've never used that word before in that context. I think that's from their time. They use the word scrap. Which I guess is an interesting word to use. Um, Little disconcerting, but okay, not my world. And so we used him as a guide, and we were walking along this trail for a while. And Pedro was up front, and the guide was in front of him. We were all spaced out in intervals because you don't want to bunch up in case there's another ambush. Anyway, Pedro was looking at the scanner, which I believe was looking for mines, things like that, booby traps. And I noticed that the guide kind of went off to the side. He was walking in the middle, just like we were. And then he casually went off to the side, kept on walking. And immediately I shouted out to Pedro, Pedro, stop. But he didn't. And he triggered an explosion. There was an underground mine that had a wooden casing, and all it had was a pressure sensor and like some sort of a radio device. So I guess it wasn't detected. And there was explosives that were attached to a tree right across from that position. So Pedro took this full blast, and he fell. And I went right to him, and he was just a mess. He was covered in blood. It was coming out of his mouth. He was trying to tell me something, you know, and then he just passed. And you know what? It affected me, not quite as much as it affected my other self, but it affected me. And then I felt this rage coming from inside my other self, and he just kind of seized control. All I could do was just kind of watch. And he went over to that rebel and just hit him with the side of his gun, the stock, and just knocked him right down. And he almost killed him. He put the barrel up to his head and was ready to pull that trigger. And I just tell him, stop. We need him, as a guide. And then some other soldiers came up. They did the same thing. So we stood him up, but we did give him a good kick to his head. So he had a broken nose, I think. Um, I think he lost a few teeth too, but he's still alive. So that puts him in a better condition than he should be. So we then used him to walk the rest of the way. I then saw where the base was, some number of meters away. They didn't have any guards posted, which wasn't very smart. So I had one soldier. I was kind of in command at that point because I was an OCS type of candidate, officer, cadet. In order to become an officer, though, in the Guard, you have to serve as enlisted in that Royal U.S. Guard. So that's what I was doing, but they had us in charge. Pedro was another one, but of course he's gone. So I ordered a soldier just to, make sure he didn't talk, and I heard her. She put the barrel of the gun in his mouth and said that she'd scrap him if he said a word. This is not a nice situation. It's not a nice world from that standpoint. But nothing that we haven't done here a million times, so we can't be bragging. And then we went in a half circle and just wiped them out. I mean, they all had guns. They all fought back, and we wiped them out. We scrapped them, as they all said. Uh, so mission accomplished. Then I started getting, and I didn't feel as badly though about these guys as I felt before. I think that's I was in the military. I have all the training, but I was never in combat. So I didn't have that experience, but I guess now I kind of have. And I just didn't feel as bad that time. So I think there's probably that evolution in combat. You start out one person, you become another person. So anyway, I started getting the shocks, and I returned to my body. So that one's going to be airing on this coming Saturday at 9 a.m. in the morning on YouTube, Astral Club.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Rick. So wait, what's interesting to me? That's 200 years in the future, right? Is that what you said? 200 years?
Yeah, about
Yeah. If I had to guess, yeah, possible future for sure. If I had to guess, I would say drones. I would say robots. I would say all of that would take the place of human guards and military, like any human interaction. Do you know what I mean? Like
Well,
somehow they would fight wars via drones and
well,
robots.
I know I had a personal drone. I forgot to mention it. And
The
yeah,
little
well,
mosquito,
we
right?
call it the dragonfly.
Oh,
It's
dragonfly.
like a dragonfly. So we had the tech, and I know there was some sort of aerial surveillance, even though I don't know what it was. But remember, this world, at least the United States, destroyed itself in a civil war. There was chaos until it was restored. So they still had tech. I guess they, it gets confusing after a while. They still had technology, but it may not have been at the same level or the level you expect it to be, because of all that chaos and destruction in the war. Uh, we had some technology, but we still needed. And you know what? We have a lot of technology now. We've got drones and all this rest, but we still need boots on the ground. We still do to get the job done.
Huh. Rick, one kind of deep question that comes to mind when I think about this story of yours, experience of yours. So, like parallel lives. So, what decides which one you are conscious of, or are we conscious of all of them all the time? But it only feels like we're conscious of them due to the limitations and restrictions that we have in this human existence. You know what I mean? Because if I would think that, okay, I have tons of parallel lives out there, maybe, or whatever, but this one feels like this is the only one I'm conscious of, even though the other ones are existing. Do you know does that
Yeah.
question make
Well,
sense at all?
it involves the nature of time. All times are happening at the same time, just at different energy levels. So we're all living hundreds, maybe more lives, in different times, different places, different planets, possibly. And that's all happening at the same time. You're not conscious of it because our human brains would not be able to contain all of that knowledge, all those memories. You'd end up in some psychiatric institute. You couldn't do it.
Of that life, and possibly they're like, I don't see how I could be conscious in any other life like this, even though I'm here
Mhm.
conscious of this life. You know what I mean? It's very interesting to kind of
Yeah, well,
think about.
it's just like, another example is, imagine a car in traffic, past, present, and future. You remember where you were a minute ago, which is your past. You know where you are right now, which is your present, and you have an idea of where you're going to be in the future, but you're not quite sure. Imagine, and that's what. But so all you can really see is what's in the present for you. But a helicopter, okay, something with a different ability level, could see your past, present, and future all at the same time. Imagine a traffic helicopter telling you that even though you're cruising along at 70 miles an hour, that in 5 minutes you're going to be in a traffic jam. And if you didn't know better, you'd be like, they're predicting the future. They just have a different
Yeah,
vantage point.
that's such a great metaphor. Yeah, I've heard you say that before. That's such a great metaphor for that. I think
Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah, 'cause it's a hard thing to really get your head around.
Hmm. So then you had fear and astral projection. That was another video you had recently. And that's kind of like an educational, trying to help people out when it comes to fear, kind of giving them an idea of what it's
Sure.
all about.
Yeah,
So you say you conquer your fear. So you say at the end, one conquers their fear, the astral awaits your exploration, which is pretty big. So personally, I have a question that I think people could relate to. So, like, number one, the big question, how does one master their fear? That's huge. But, like, personally, I can sit here and tell you truthfully, honestly, to the best of my ability, that I'm not fearful, right? I see all this stuff. I hear all you talking about. Great. I'm like, okay, that comes, and I'm going to be able to handle it. So I don't feel the fear here. But then, when it comes down to it, and I've had my first I've practiced and I've tried, and I, will have these moments of like a touch of hopping into that next world of the metaphysical or whatever. And boom, it's like a knee jerk fear reaction. It's like I don't even get a second to, explore or go any further with it. It's just boom. And that obviously is fear that's hitting me. But like, I don't even have that opportunity to be like, all right, chill out, Nick. You know what's going on. Put that to the side, your emotions and fear to the side, and move on. So like, I clearly have fear issues. So like, how does one conquer their fear? And then in this situation, how does one conquer their fear? Because I'm sure there's probably different levels.
Fear, is something that we look at as negative, but it really helped our species to survive, especially back in the old days when we were not the top of the food chain in any way, shape, or form. And our fear helped to give us the caution we needed to avoid the hungry lion, or else we wouldn't be here. However, fear can be debilitating. There's no doubt about that. That fear comes is an animal fear. It's an ego attached fear. And it often happens when people are in the early projection process. See, you need the subconscious and the conscious mind to be on the same page to fully astral project. The subconscious mind, though, is not easily influenced by reading books or watching videos. That message has to be given in different ways, like during meditation and picturing yourself in a meditative state when you're meditating, going through that process and dealing with that fear. Because fear typically is dealt with in situations where, oh, I'm afraid of snakes. So they put you in a room, some psychiatrist or whatever, snakes on the other side of the room. Gradually, you get closer and closer and closer, and eventually you pet the darn thing. And that's how you master your fear, by being in that situation over and over and over and realizing that there's really nothing to fear. If you've ever read the Dune series, there's this litany against fear that I actually memorized because I liked it so much. And I use it sometimes to myself if I'm feeling fearful for any reason. And the litany is, I will not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings complete obliteration. I will look inside, turn my inner eye inside. I will face my fear. I will allow it to pass over and through me. And when I see its path, the fear is gone. And I've done that, I've used that many times since college, and it's helped me to visualize the fear and to deal with it that way. So, that's from the Dune
That's
series.
great.
Yeah, so that was, I like that. But so, yeah, it's something that you have to expose yourself to. And reading books does help. Watching non-fear based videos or episodes, whatever, does help. But eventually, you have to master what inner fear you have left. You have to realize that there's no good reason to fear. It's just animal fear. And it helped us to survive thousands and thousands of years ago. But it can inhibit us now. So we have to deal with it and allow it to go over and pass through us, and then see that it's gone. It was just a phantom. It wasn't real. Uh, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Wow. Okay. I got you. Yeah. That's cool, Rick. Thanks for elaborating on that and helping out there. Um, Man, I have a bunch of videos. I don't want to steal all your time, though. I want you to be. There's just some interesting ones that I really want to hit up. Like, all right, so the Jesus one. Do you want to talk about that now?
sure. I have.
So you.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
I avoided doing that, going back in time to do that for a number of reasons. One of which was I don't have a religious channel. It's astral projection. Sometimes it works its way somewhere into an episode, especially if I'm doing like a rescue or something for somebody who was religious and now they're in a lower astral or trapped there and they need help. And so I act as a guide and help them. And I have to read their mind. And if there's somebody who's a Roman Catholic or whatever, I have to use my knowledge of that to help them help themselves. Um, but at any rate, I also, like I said, that was the main reason I didn't want to do it. It was also difficult. See, going back into the past, I find that you can either pick a place or a time, but trying to do both at the same time is very difficult. Um,
Yeah, so that really quick before you continue, that was really interesting to me. So you developed the method of going down a hill super fast, and then you, like you just said, you gotta either think of a place or a time, and then a portal will just show up if you're lucky, if it worked. And then that's so interesting. So this portal shows up, and then you just shoot right through it, and then
it's like a
so
wormhole.
is it? Yeah. Now, is this something that Rick was like, all right, I need to think of a creative way to travel in time, and this is my creation? Or is this something, an inspiration from what you've gathered, and then this just happened? Or did you like fall upon it,
No,
like that method?
I pretty much came up with it because I'd read a lot of astral projection books after that Gavin and Yvonne Frost book, and I read Robert Monroe's books, Sylvan Muldoon's books, of course Robert Bruce, lots of others, but they didn't really get into time travel. So I had to just experiment, and so yeah, I just eventually hit upon flying down the hill fast, concentrating, willing. Will is a big deal. Willing myself to a certain time. And if I'm lucky, the portal opens up and I shoot down it. Sometimes it doesn't open up and I just wasted a projection. So
Will and intention are so interesting to me. And I remember I was picking your brain on the comments of one of your videos a few months back about will, and you did a good job of describing it to me. And it pretty much came down to it's kind of like the same, you will yourself to go get a hamburger or whatever it is from the kitchen, and you're pretty much, that's what you're doing in the astral. Is it right, or
yeah,
did I
whenever I write the word will, whenever I write it, you're going to see it in caps, all caps, because it is the major way you get around in the astral. In the physical, yes, what happens is you have an idea, a little bit of will. I'm going to walk across and make myself a sandwich. The brain sends the signals to the through the neurons to the various muscles, and your bones help you. You get up, you walk across, and you make that sandwich. In the astral, you don't have a physical brain. You don't have any neurons. You don't have muscles or bones. What you have is your pure will, and you have to be able to think one thought and will it with no other intrusions. So you're
mm,
training yourself to become intensely focused. Because I remember one time
interesting.
I was going to go to the moon, and I started heading towards the moon, and for some reason, this is when I was a kid, I thought about my third grade teacher. Well, I ended up in my old third grade teacher's house, uh, and I was like, oh, great. Because I lost that will for a second. That's what
So
guides you.
very focused, become a very focused thinker. And that's so interesting because, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but here in this human existence, it's kind of second nature, isn't it? Like second hand to us. Like we kind of will things naturally. Like we're talking about, you make yourself a sandwich, you just go do it. Does
But the problem is,
like, am I
though,
getting it off?
we live in a multitasking world,
Oh
especially
yeah,
when we're at work, and then we just use it at home. We're always thinking about something else. And how many
yeah.
times do people sit down to watch TV and then they
And
start
actually
playing?
just watch TV.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
that's what we used to do in the ancient days. But
yeah,
now you watch TV with your laptop open. So you're
yeah.
answering an email, watching TV. You're posting a comment,
Absolutely. Yeah.
watching TV. And then you start thinking about, oh, what am I going to do tomorrow when I get to work? And so all of this is floating around, all this noise. And if you want to astral project properly, you've got to quiet that noise. And you've got to have a single will thought. And basically, it's like if I might die, but I'm going to this time, okay? And just concentrate on that. Your entire will, your entire being is willing you to that place or time. Um, and the problem with the Jesus thing is nobody even knows exactly what year, for instance, he was crucified. We know it was around Passover, but we're not sure which one. So I knew it was, and then there was always the doubt that he even existed. So it was just something I wasn't interested in doing. But eventually, like I said, I got pushed into it, and I decided to do it. It took me a lot of astral projections to get to the right place and the right time. I ended up first when I appeared. I knew it was where Jerusalem was because that's what I was shooting for, but there was nothing but ruins. So I went too far. And then I tried again, and there was nothing. So I got here too early. So I had to try a number of times just to get there where Jerusalem was standing. And eventually I was able to, I toured the temple quickly because, I wanted to see the second temple. It wasn't as fancy as I thought it was going to be, but it was still, somewhat impressive. Huge doors. Uh, and I actually checked out Pontius Pilate too, found him. And I figured that it'd be right around Passover because that's when they beefed up the Roman soldiers. Because Passover had a lot of Jews coming from all over the place. And back in those days, if you had a lot of Jews coming into a place like Jerusalem, there's going to be trouble. So Romans would boost up their bands and their manpower, and Pontius Pilate or Pontius Pilatus, which is his name in Latin. So I found where he was. It was right near Herod's palace, and I found him. He was like a middle-aged guy, not all that impressive. I mean, I scanned his mind. He had a strong will, uh, so I wasn't able to get very far with him. I actually, though, was able to contact a woman's mind who was kind of in a sleep, and I sensed that she was his wife. So I was able to make suggestions to her to leave this, Yeshua Bar Joseph alone. He's bad. He's a bad omen for your family. The Romans were very superstitious. So I thought,
Oh, Rick, sorry to interrupt. That's really interesting. I was reading the comments of it, I think last night or something. There's comments that people left on that video. And you said something, there was a long comment someone left about the wife of Pontius Pilate or
yeah, I saw
the
that.
real name. Yeah, and then you said something like, "Oh, that's a lot to take in" or something. But anyway, so that all makes sense then what you're saying because she have a suggestion to him in real time and you suggested it to her. That's so
Yeah, she
interesting,
got
isn't it?
probably got the suggestion from me because I was trying to help. I guess. Like I said, I couldn't get far with old Pilatus. He was too strong-willed. Uh, didn't do any good in the end, but whatever. You do your best, right?
Yeah,
Then
there you go.
eventually, I got to a point where I saw him. He had a robe on, kind of almost covering his face, but I could still see him. He had kind of black curly hair, and he had a bronze kind of face, skin tone. His eyes looked deep, from what I could see. But then I was shut down. My guide interfered and told me to go back, go back home, and that's what I got the ban for because they didn't want me talking to
Oh,
him. And I guess they figured that I might end up changing the past, which is something that I wouldn't ordinarily be able to do. But he saw me. I know he saw me because I thought a telepathic thought to him, and he turned and looked at me, so he could see me. So I guess therefore I had a chance to do something. Um, I was already worried because I was like, what happens if he asked me what happened to my teachings? And would I lie to him and say, "Oh, it was fine," or would I tell him some of the naughty things that happened over the years? And if I did that, would it change things? Would he be
right.
like, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm
So,
gonna go back and build something in the carpentry shop.
yeah, if that's the case.
But
So that's interesting, Rick. So were you prepared to say something specific to him when connection was made, or was
I
there a
was just going to
question or
introduce
something? Or,
myself
oh
and
yeah,
see if he had any questions. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not going to sit there and talk to him about spacecraft and airplanes because he still was a man of his time. Extraordinary, but he was still a man of his time. So it wasn't my job to throw things at him. I just wanted to see if he had any questions for me. Questions that I could comfortably answer were preferred. But I was afraid he'd ask me that because it would be a natural thing for a teacher to ask. You know, but I didn't get the chance.
So then your guardian angel said, "Hey, Rick, no, you can't be doing that, buddy.
Yep.
That's a no-no." Because I'm guessing because of how much of an influence Jesus and his teachings have on this world that we live in now and so many people.
Sure.
I guess anything you did would have not just a tiny butterfly effect, but some, just ginormous one. And I don't know if that's a big no. I don't know. I have no idea. This is just me speculating. I don't know.
Some people ask me, did you ask permission from your angel guide before you did this? I said no, because my personality is I'd rather beg for forgiveness than ask permission. That's just my personality. What people ask me.
That's like a true adventurer, huh? Nothing's going to stop you from doing your adventures.
I wouldn't have been able to accomplish what I've accomplished if I was constantly asking people for permission.
That's true.
My personality. Some people have asked me over the years, did you get a guide when you started projecting? I was like, look, I started as a kid. It never occurred to me you could do something like that. It wasn't until I was 11 that I bought Robert Monroe's book, Journeys Out of the Body. I stayed up all night as an 11-year-old reading that thing with a flashlight. And I finished it in the morning, and I wasn't even tired. I was so energized because of that. But I never knew you could even do that. I didn't hook up with my angel guide until a lot later, basically, I think, back in college.
Hey, Rick, that reminded me of something I was going to ask you from the very beginning when you were talking about your prior experience to this, or like when you said like you picked your parents.
Yes.
Because like I always hear of stories of people talking to some sort of a guide where they're like, "Hey, you got these options. You got 3 options here. Which one do you want to go live in?" And then, but yours. This one was so different because you were like, "Hey, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to go find this guy and I'm going to go whisper in his ear and make this happen." I guess there's multiple ways out there that you can move into a human experience instead of just, hey, three choices.
It's a lot like our school system. When you're in elementary school, your teachers pretty much control all your activities because you're too young to really be able to make good decisions about what you should be doing. As you get older, though, high school and college, you get more and more independence because you probably earned it, and that you're now able to make some good decisions. It's really the same when it comes to your parents. There are some souls that just aren't in a position to make wise decisions for their soul.
They need the training wheels or whatever.
Yeah, they need more lifetimes, what have you. And I guess when a soul gets to a certain point, you have the right to go ahead and select your own parents. And because I knew what my mission was going to be, and I knew I was going to be projecting and that I wanted to help others. So I needed to pick my parents to make sure that even though they weren't necessarily going to follow with me in that they were the kind of parents who would not interfere. And would allow me to do what I needed to do, and they were the right kind of people to allow me to do that. So I had to pick my own parents. It just was something I had to do, and I was lucky enough to be able to have the right to do it. So I guess I gotten into Astral College at some point or whatever. So
yeah. So there was another one I wanted to talk about, but was there anything about the Jesus story experience that you wanted to add, or are you good with that one?
I think I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I mentioned the main points.
So this one's super interesting to me, Rick, and we don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but it's the haunted by a succubus one.
Oh, okay, sure.
That's so interesting.
I posted the episodes. I guess I'm going to talk about it.
So you leave your body. You're young. You're 13. You leave your body. You find a female. There's an attractive female that you find in the astral. So next thing you know, she's kind of like preying on you, She's preying on you.
Well, I invited her to visit.
Prey.
I invited her to visit me sometime, not knowing
Yeah.
what I was getting myself into. I didn't know
Yeah.
she was some
Well,
sort.
and you're 13, so I mean, it's
Yes, and I'm
it's
13. Let's not forget that.
yeah. So that's
The
clouding a lot of judgment there.
hormones are gone.
Yeah.
And
So that's interesting. So then she shows up and she's like, "Get rid of the Bible, and I can come back." And of course, you're 13. You're like, "Sounds good to me."
oh yeah,
So it's so interesting. She asked for consent.
yeah,
She asked for the consent, and you gave it, because if you didn't, I guess none of it could even happen
no,
due to free will.
no.
Yeah.
If you give consent, they have the consent to do whatever they want to do. You then have to properly go back on that and to eject them by withdrawing that consent. So yeah, she would visit me, and I'm not going to lie, it was kind of pleasant. But I found myself over a period of weeks and a number of months, I was getting weaker and weaker, to a point where, I mean, I enjoyed school, but I was starting to like nod off in class back in my day, you got in trouble for that. Nowadays, I hear teachers are just like, he's not causing trouble, leave him alone. Yeah, I was a boomer. We got in trouble for a lot of stuff. Um, so I knew something was happening because I just felt weaker and weaker and weaker. And that's when I went to the local library. And whenever the librarian saw me, she always shook her head. I always ask for weird things. I might be like, okay, well, I want the Gibbons book on the Roman Empire. Okay. Keep in mind I'm in junior high school, but I was interested in history and the Romans especially. And then I'd ask for something like, yeah, I'm looking for a book that would help expel demons. So
And then she's looking
she
at you
helped me
like,
find some stuff, what little stuff they had, and it did help me. It did help me. I learned what I had to do, and a Bible was part of that, and another part was conducting. I was reading in my room the 23rd Psalm, uh, which is uh, which is the famous one, where I'm sitting at dinner before mine enemies. I will not fear, for thee is with me. That one there. And then when she showed up and she took me to her plane, where there was a ton of other of these types of women, probably would have just, I guess, sucked me dry a little weak.
yeah,
Uh, but then I
it
went
drained your
ahead
life force.
and I told them, basically use the whole "get thee behind me, Satan," in the name of the name of Jesus, whatever. And that worked. And I hear a number of religious traditions work at least, but I was using the Christian one because that's the one I was the most familiar with. And I said I withdraw consent. Do not visit me ever again. And I never got visited again. Um, Although
Wow.
she did show up once years later, and I did the same thing, and she took off. Uh,
Really? So she tried again.
yeah, I guess
And that was your immediate reaction.
yes, I just got rid of
There
her.
was no dialogue, no how's it been?
No,
Why are you back?
no. Listen, having that kind of experience as a young man is very tempting, but I knew it wasn't a long term experience. If I allowed that to happen, it wouldn't have gone well.
Well, your life force was being drained. So then that questions I arise in my mind. So having sex here in our human existence, we've done it and we've felt drained before.
Sure.
I wonder if it's probably you can come to the same conclusion if you do that enough, unresponsibly with ill intentions or something, because I feel like there's probably a sacred, beautiful, positive way to have sex with another being where you could probably do it more often than not and not feel so drained, is my guess. So it's just interesting how, those ties can be made and how your life force could be drained here as well, doing,
Well, sure.
just having,
A lot of it
doing
has
that
to
in
do
a
with
bad way.
intention.
Hmm.
What your intention is in that process. But it's a fact that semen has been used, and orgasms have been used. I think it says reconnecting. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sounded like a robot for a second, but I think you're good now. I see you and I hear you
Okay.
fine.
Okay. Yeah, it's
I
been
think
used.
everything's good.
Yeah, just they just got this thing buzzing saying reconnecting. But they've used semen and orgasms in Wiccan rituals for a long time because there's power there. There's energy that's released in that process, and it's very powerful. And so you have to, I guess, be aware of the process and what you're doing, and make sure that
Yeah.
you're with the right kind of people.
So also, Rick, this is just a little side thing. So she was able to do things to you. You're in the physical, and you could feel it, even though she's not in the physical. I
Correct.
think you mentioned something like that
Yeah,
in the
I
video.
think what
That's super interesting to me because. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
she was accessing my mind as well. She was in my head as well, and so she was probably able to, send those signals to my mind with that sensation information. So I had the visuals.
Oh, okay.
I also
That
had
makes.
the sensation that's probably going
Yeah.
directly into my mind.
That's so interesting, Rick, because it's not a matter of you have a ghost or spirit from in another plane that's actually touching you. It's more of like you just said, you have things triggering in your mind. You have things that are being triggered in your mind with visuals, and the next thing you know, you have a good experience.
Sure.
So then that makes me think, like talking about Neuralink or any kind of chip in the brain in the future, you'll probably have something very similar to that, what we just described.
Most definitely, I'm sure, because I mean, doctors already know. When they operate and do brain surgery, you're awake when they do it because you're not feeling pain in that brain surgery. But they know they can trigger certain parts of your brain, and you'll be like, "Oh, I smell garlic now," or "Oh, I just feel really hot now." So, I mean, there's areas of your brain where they know they can trigger those types of things. So, certainly a spirit like that would have the same kind of ability, especially when you give
Cool.
them consent.
Very cool and
But it's
interesting.
only when you give them consent.
Yeah. Consent. Yeah, it's huge. What else? Man, there's all sorts of things, Rick. I don't want to take. There's the loosh we could talk about. The prison astral prisoner rescue. You've rescued countless. Well, I only know of two that you have rescued. It was the person in that apartment building, and then it was that
That's
girl
a good.
down in like her hell or whatever in the caves.
Yeah, I really like.
And like, have you rescued? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rick. Go ahead.
I really like to tell you the story about the apartment because it's an interesting story. Uh, I took another job, and it was down south. I wanted my wife though to stay in our house up north because our daughter was going through her senior year. And I wanted to help her get through that and get into college, then sell the house and come down. So I lived in this luxury apartment that had been a textile mill at one point, but it closed down. Sometime in the late '60s, early '70s, and all that went over to China. But it had lain abandoned for decades. And so a number of drug users or whatever would often congregate there, I found out, and shoot up, and nobody would mess with them, nobody would bother them then. And then, years later, they took the place and refurbished it and made it into a series of luxury apartments. It was kind of cool. I mean, the ceilings were, I needed maintenance to come with a ladder to actually change my bulbs, a big ladder, because it was like a 16-foot ceiling. It was enormous. And It was kind of isolated too. They put me on the top floor. I think it was because I was older, and they had like the older people up there and younger people down. It's funny though. In the year I spent there, I never saw another tenant on our floor. It was weird, but so I certainly didn't know anybody. So I moved into this place, and a few weeks later, I'm just sitting there on a weekend. It's nighttime, and I hear this sharp knock. And I was thinking, who the heck could that be at this time? It's not apartment people at this time. It's like 10 o'clock. But okay, I'll just see what's going on. So I go there, open up the door, and there's nobody there, no one around. So I just like, okay, maybe there's weird acoustics, maybe somebody knocked at a door somewhere. So I just closed the door, forgot about it. 2 weeks later, pretty much doing the same thing, watching a little bit of TV, knock. And these are steel doors too. So it reverberated throughout this big room. Um, and so I got up, went to the door, opened it up, nobody's there. So I'm thinking, is there some kids playing doorbell ditch here? Uh, so I was a little annoyed, but what am I going to do? I closed the door again. Another couple weeks later, this time though, I'm in the kitchen and it's really close to where the door is. And I hear that knock. I run to the door. It's not more than a couple seconds. I open it up. There's nobody there. Now, there was not enough time for anybody to run away because we had these long halls. And I was like, something's going on here. And maybe I should look into it. Maybe something's trying to contact me because that does happen sometimes. So the next time I astral projected, instead of going right out the window, I just decided to explore around the area. And I found there was this young woman. We'll call her Jane. And she had passed from a heroin overdose. And she had been within these walls. I guess they kind of dug a space through a wall and then went in there. It was just brick in the wall, and they kind of hid there, and they'd shoot up. She overdosed. Her boyfriend took off, and she was so guilt ridden that she had been there for decades, just drenched in sadness and regret, self-loathing. It was awful. So I scanned her real quick, and I found all this out. And I just, sat down next to her, started talking with her, let her know that she can move on now. There's all this is gone. You don't have to worry about any of this regret anymore. You're forgiven. I guarantee it. And I started to convince her, and I told her to clear her mind and to ask for help to leave this low level of the astral. And all I saw was her like light up, and then she just faded away. And it was interesting. A couple years later, she actually visited me when I just left my body, just to tell me that everything was going great, that she had picked a new body, and she was looking forward to her next lifetime. And she thanked me, which I thought was really nice.
That must have felt so good, Rick.
Yeah,
Didn't you feel when you saw her light up and move on or whatever? That probably like you probably felt amazing, huh?
yeah, yeah. I wouldn't want my worst enemy to be stuck in the lower astral. It's just stuck in this awful space. I wouldn't want anyone to do that. And so I've done a number of rescues.
Yeah. So, well, really quick before I ask about the other rescues, the that brings me emotion in the astral. You always say, "Don't show fear," or "Don't have any fear. Don't have any strong emotions, or you're going to be pulled back." It's as simple as that, right?
Yeah.
But then aren't there cases? Correct me if I'm wrong. Aren't there cases where you have an emotion, like you can? Yeah, you could have an emotion, but you aren't necessarily pulled back, or
You
does that
can
never
have
happen? Like if is that strict?
you can have emotions, but you have to control them because any strong emotion, your astral cord will interpret
Okay,
as a possible threat and pull you back. Keep in mind that another name for
okay,
the astral plane in occult science is the emotional plane. Your emotions are 10 times as strong in the astral as they are in the physical. So if you're feeling that self loathing type of behavior, it weighs you down, like chains. You sometimes we see spirits in chains, right? That's metaphorical. They're weighing themselves down with these thoughts, and no one's imprisoning them. They're imprisoning themselves. And if they're so deeply, deeply in self hatred, you can't even reach them. They won't even pay attention to you or hear you. Luckily, she'd reached a point where she wanted help. That's what the knocks were all about. It just took 2 weeks each time because she used up all of her energy to do that physical knock. So it took another couple of weeks. That's why people who experience poltergeists, they'll usually be activity, and then they won't have anything for a few weeks, and then it'll start again. It's because they've got to recharge.
That reminds me of your story of, I think you were in another apartment or something when they rattled the pots and pans or something in the kitchen, and it's exactly what you're saying. They had to recharge, because I think it happened. It didn't happen like day after day. I think they took a while to recharge to do that again, right?
Yeah, that was in my last house. Um, I found out that a lot of people had lived there and they'd gotten out of their lease very quickly. So it was haunted. Uh, and I noticed that when I started hearing these kinds of noises at night. Now, I went ahead and just did a little mini exorcism ritual trying to expel them, send them on their way. And it worked. Uh, but that's why there had been so many people. I even talked to one of the guys who had been there for like 6 months, and I could see as he was talking about it, he wanted to tell me something. And when I asked to project a lot, I get some low level telepathy, and I could tell that there was something behind his eyes that he wanted to tell me, but he didn't know how. It's a weird thing to bring up, especially to a current tenant. So I know he had experienced things too, as some of these other tenants had. I hope that the house is okay now because, like I said, it was okay when I left.
Hey, you probably got the job done. So, Rick, you had a team, didn't you? Have a team of you were in the Astral. What was the name of your? Oh man, you had like a team. You had the monk on your team. You
Astral
had
Guide School.
A couple of other people that you would. Astral Guide School, yeah. And was your mission, like sole mission, to rescue people? Is that what you did?
Yes, that's pretty much designed for that. Most of the people in Astral Guide School have already passed. I was the only living person because of my ability to astral project and my interest in being a guide.
Oh,
If you want to be a guide, can you hear me?
I lost you, Rick.
Okay, are we back?
I don't know if power went out or what, but
Are we back?
Rick just disconnected here. And this is my first time using Riverside, so I'm not sure what to do right now.
Are we
I
back
don't know if I
yet?
should stop the recording or hope Rick comes back or what. Maybe I'll send him an email and see what's going on. Okay.
So yeah, it's just
Sorry
getting into
about that. I don't
something
know what happened.
interesting too. Um, when
Yeah, it was Astral Guide School. Maybe the Astral Guide School doesn't want us talking about it or something. I don't know what's
I
going
wouldn't be
on.
surprised. But the first part of the process is when I wanted to get into it, I was told I had to go through a testing period, and you have to ask for that testing. Once again, giving consent. That's very big. So each night as I was going to bed, I would ask to have these testing dreams. Robert Monroe had them. If you look at Journeys Out of the Body, he talks about them. Or maybe it was the last book, Far Journeys. I'm not sure. Either way. Uh, what they do is they put you through these testing dreams, and they feel real, and you think you're doing what you're doing at the time. You don't know that this is a test, because what good would it be if you knew? And it puts you through these tests, which are normally they involve morality, empathy, forgiveness, your willingness to be selfless, these kinds of things. And they have these little tests they set up, and if you pass them all on the first try, you can go and get into guide school within a month or two. I didn't pass all of them the first time; it took me longer, but eventually I did, and then I was able to go to Astral Guide School um, because of my ability to astral project. Somebody who's not quite as good at astral projection might have to wait until they pass. But the point of it is then you get put into other training simulations in the Astral Guide School, helping you. These are realer too. These are like actual ones because you're dealing with souls that have passed, and they put you through various tests. One of them was for forgiveness. It was like a two-parter. One, I was faced with an ex-camp guard, a Nazi, and he had wrought. We could see what he had wrought in those camps. He had been committed atrocities beyond imagination. And we had to show him forgiveness. That was very difficult, but managed to. I guess what I understood that helped me was that he had damaged himself more than he had damaged those people in the camps. And then I had to face bullies, and there's something weird because I'm in my early 60s, and my bullies always came in pairs for some reason. And it was because I didn't fit in. Okay, I didn't just talk about sports, and I didn't hate school, and I was always doing other independent study. I learned more out of school than I learned in school sometimes. So I got some bullied attention, and they've all passed though. Like 90% of them have passed. I mean, they're my age. So I have to ask myself: is being a bully, is it also destroying yourself as well as hurting someone else? And even worse, because there's like one guy who's still alive, and I read about him on Facebook. He seems to really turned his life around. He's a genuinely nice guy, helping people. So he's still around. But these other people, I guess, didn't. And one of them was someone who was in elementary school, and he went to San Francisco, and he was gay. Of course, we didn't know that, and I felt badly for him because he was concealing that. I know nowadays a lot of kids are out in their schools. In my day, you did not do that. If you did, you would be mercifully tortured. That's just the way it was back then. So he went to San Francisco, got into some sort of artistic occupation, and then he got AIDS, and he ended up passing like around 1990. And, when I found that out, I forgave him because I understood the torture he must have gone through. And I'm not even talking about AIDS. It's just having to conceal that, from other people, that part of yourself. And then I faced another bully who, and of course, Chris is what his name was. He was very happy and was very contrite with how he had treated me, along with his other friend. But this other guy, he didn't believe that he had done anything wrong and that I was making more out of this than it should have been. And I still forgave him, but he wasn't helping himself by not taking responsibility, because, in essence, he wasn't forgiving himself. Because unless you acknowledge, it's almost like an AA meeting, unless you acknowledge that you made a mistake and that you did things that were wrong, if you don't acknowledge that, you can't change the behavior. So he's just going to carry that load with him into his next life, and who knows after that. So that was one thing that Astral Guide School did, was to introduce that concept of forgiveness. Because if you're dealing with people and you're going to try to help them go to the next plane, you're going to be dealing with nice people, and you're going to be dealing with not so nice people, and you have to help them both because you're not the judge. Okay, in the end, they're their own judge, and they'll be the toughest judge that anybody would ever provide. But you have to be able to help these people. You have to have empathy. You have to have adaptability. You've got to have intelligence and emotional intelligence. And you have to know a little bit about a lot of things, a lot about religions and what have you, so that you can help people.
I noticed you're like perfect for the job because in your stories I noticed that you are really quick on your feet. You're very witty. You're able to come up with solutions on the fly, and very intelligent that way. So, and you just said that's an important factor when you're dealing with
Yes.
these things.
You
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
you have
yeah.
to mold yourself to what they need, even physically. You can change your astral body to look like their grandmother or somebody else they trusted.
Well, even getting yourself out of sticky situations too, because one thing that comes to my mind is you being trapped. I don't know if you were chained to or whatever, but the black hole situation, and you were like, "All right, this sucks. What am I supposed to do?" And you're like, "Huh, maybe if I think you got out of it by traveling into the past or something like that."
It was either yes to the past because it was easier than going into the future because this thing was going to last for a long time, but it hadn't been around that long. So I was able to go back into the past where it didn't exist. In which case, I was able.
You're free there.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
got to think on your
Huh.
feet. You have to.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. So, well, back to how many people you have rescued, because I'm guessing it's just there are countless amounts that you just haven't talked about and
All over
haven't
the
made
world.
videos about.
I've mentioned a few.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've mentioned a few. One an old
Yeah.
lady in Russia. I did work in Ukraine through that awful situation, and of course in the U.S. and in many other places. Um, Usually, I do the best work in areas where there's like the Mosaic religions because I am more knowledgeable about the Mosaic religions. You know, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. I had courses on all of them in college, and I've studied them since then. So I'm more comfortable in that environment. But I try to do whatever I have to do. I'm always thinking, I have that mind thinking, how do I get out of this? How do I help this person? What do I have to do? And you have to be dedicated, and you have to be selfless because I don't expect thanks. And you have to stay on the lower astral too. And that's not a fun place. The lower astral is like a bad neighborhood. And I've mentioned that I usually dress myself in a long black robe. It's hooded just because I don't want to mess. I don't want to have to deal with things. And I've noticed that no matter where you are, if you're dressed like that in lower astral, most folks leave you alone because they're like, yeah, I'm not going to mess with that guy, you know. So that's kind of what I discovered because that allows you to get your. Now, of course, I have to change before I actually interact with the person needing rescue because that'd spook them. That'd be the wrong. They'd be like, oh no, it's death.
Yeah.
All I have to do is carry a sickle, right? That'd freak them out.
Uh,
So,
oh, big
try to
time. Yeah.
scan them from where I am and try to get an idea of what I have to do. Do I have to look like a priest
So,
or their grandmother? Whatever.
yeah, whatever works for that person is going to be the best. Yeah. So Rick, I have a little philosophy section. We don't have to do that. I wanted to get that in. I have a little. I have questions that were submitted from Astral Exploration. It's a Facebook group that I have with somebody, a friend of
Sure.
mine. I wanted to definitely ask those. Should we dive into the philosophy section? Should we save that for some other
Let's
time
save it
down
for
the
another
road?
time. I'm
Or
going to get to the question.
okay. Yeah, let's do that. So I just got about like 7 or so
Okay.
here. And this is from our Facebook group, Astral Exploration. So the first one is from Bianca L. Bradley, and she says, there was another astral traveler, and when he went exploring, there was a voice that told him not to go to this area, or he would not be able to return to his body. Pretty much death. Is that possible? Is her question.
Well, I can't speak for somebody else's experience. I can tell you I've had thousands of experiences, and the worst I was ever caught was because I was, out there looking for trouble, and I ended up in that black hole situation. Um, but barring that, I mean, I've flown through our sun. I've never heard any voice telling me I couldn't go somewhere, and if I did, I'd go there anyway. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
That wouldn't stop me. That wouldn't slow me
Yeah.
down. um,
Yeah.
but
Not you.
listen, that's one of the fears that I encounter. And sometimes is people thinking, oh, what if I die and my astral cord somehow severs and now I'm dead? Um, if that was going to happen, it would have happened to me already. I mean, I've been out there for years, thousands of projections, and I'm still here, still yakking away. The astral cord will not separate until your physical death, and that's going to happen right here in the physical plane. So if you're worried about astral projecting because you're thinking this thing has let me go into 500 million years in the future of the Earth, it's gone to the end of the Earth, and it's gone back into the past when the dinosaurs were running around, and space, and all the rest of that dimensions, and it's just still there. It's still working just fine. So I think I don't, I'm upset when I hear those stories because it's fear mongering. And it usually comes from people who aren't really accomplished projectors. there's somebody who maybe did it once or so, and then they read some fear-based book and it spooked them, and now they want to spook other people, and it's just not constructive. Just not.
Yep, I hear you. All right. Next one was submitted by Craig Smith. Does Russia have an Area 51? And if so, what cool stuff is in there?
I don't know. I've never explored Russia like that. Uh,
All right. There it is. Well, actually, no, that I have a segue to that. Just really quick. We don't have to dwell on it, but you talk about the moon. People think we didn't go there. People think we did go there. We talk about JFK assassination. You talk about what else? There are just also Area 51. You talk about just tons of questions people have. Astral projection, you can find the answers to these, can you
Sure.
not?
Sure.
So it's almost like it'd be really productive and helpful to have a huge astral projection group, clan, whatever you want to call it, scientific study or something, where everyone is told to investigate something and they come back with what they found and you draw conclusions from that.
Well, that's what
isn't
the
that
Explorer
interesting?
program was with Monroe. The thing is by nature I'm an introvert, except for when I'm talking about astral projection, for instance, or history. Um, I feel that my time is best spent doing what I'm doing right now. Um, Getting together some group and doing that. And I'm also kind of a loner. I'll be honest with you when it comes to astral projection. I don't want to be.
You fly
I
solo.
don't want to manage people. I want to teach people to project and go out and do it. You don't need to hold someone's hand. Go out there and do it and explore for yourself. Learn who you are and the nature of reality and the world. I don't want to hold people's hands like that. I'll teach them, but I don't want to hold their hands because they're big boys, they're big girls, and they can go off and do that. Now, I did it as a child. If I did it as a child, they can do it as an adult. And I've done my explorations. I've shared some of the interesting ones, like intelligence gathering. When Bush was first elected, the younger Bush, I wanted to just go see what was going on. And that's when I was intercepted with two Astral Secret Service agents at the White House. And I found out quickly, it was a quick scan, because they were like, "Who are you?" And I didn't want to be there. And I certainly wasn't going to tell them who I was. And I scanned them, and they were deep underground. And they were under some sort of drug that allowed them to project for a long period of time, which is ordinarily not possible. I mean, in the present, you can be gone for maybe 20 minutes, tops. In the past, you're just talking about a handful of minutes. In the future, although I've spent years in 15,000 AD with my tribe, uh, so I lived there. I had power to influence things. They called me the spirit of the morning because at first in their tribe you couldn't spend the night there unless you were a member. So I would just explore the world and come back in the morning. And I learned they gave me that name. But that's how time works. So these people were being extended in some way using some sort of drug, and they were guarding the Oval Office.
And that reminds me of, didn't you say the Great Pyramids as well had something similar where you tried to enter, but then there was a guard of some sort there? Or am I way
Yeah,
off?
I don't recall a guard, but there was definitely energy there uh, that was still residual, that was kind of set up to prevent that type of projection energy. But I was able to get in. I just had to pierce it because it's weak at this point. Whatever power they use to generate that shield is weakened over the centuries. So I was able to
Interesting.
penetrate it.
And like the Akashic Records, isn't there somebody there as well that will let you in,
Well,
or
the
is
Akashic
that not?
Records is enormous, and what you see is very much influenced by what you expect to see. I expect to see like a huge type of English library, and that's what I saw. And although another time I saw something very futuristic because I was kind of expecting that. And you could examine a wide variety of the past and the future and possible futures from the Akashic records. But for me, it's you can use it, but it's not the same as being there. So that's why I don't go there all the time. Now I was lucky in that I got an introduction from my astral, my angel guide. So I had somebody there waiting for me. They can be rude to people from our time when you project there because they don't think much of us. So you can actually get ignored. But I was lucky that I was able to get some help because it was set up for me. Uh, so yeah, it's there. There's information to be had. I've done it a number of times. I'm more interested in exploring for myself, though. Once again, that's just who I am.
All right, let's go on here. Sayant, sorry for the name mispronunciation. Chakra Borti says, can you ask him about Kundalini awakening?
Okay. Yeah, that's your this energy force goes up your. It roots itself in your root chakra, okay, and then it goes all the way up to the top of your head. It's it's a force, an energy that keeps us alive and thriving. And people use it sometimes for sex purposes by activating the Kundalini energy to give them more energy to do that. And it, it involves a number of things, including meditation, helping that to visualize that energy increasing and going right up your spine to the top of your head. Uh, uh, it's something I did practice in college a bit. I haven't really done much with it since then. Um,
Can someone definitively say I had a Kundalini awakening or experience?
sure.
Is
Oh,
that a
you can
thing?
feel it.
Yeah.
It's like it's
Yeah.
like this huge explosion of power in your head. It's definitely like an explosion. That's how you know it's opened up. Yes, in college. I had a girlfriend. I was trying to, you know,
Yeah.
be all I
That's
could
cool.
be,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that's great. Elizabeth Napper says how to remove psychological or learned blocks that disallow any astral travel.
Once again, the best way to do that is to read non-fear based astral projection books, watch non-fear based stuff on YouTube and whatever else you can access, and that's the way to do it. And then meditate on it. And if you got the fear, deal with the fear. See the source of the fear, allow it to pass over and through you, and see that it's gone. And that's how you do it.
Gotcha. So this one's from Nora Emam. She's my friend who made this group with me. She says, how can I visit someone in the astral in this timeline without meeting another version of them in a parallel universe? I used to be able to do it, but now when I try to visit anyone, I always end up meeting a parallel version of them. And why does this happen now when it wasn't the case for me before?
Well, once you travel in time or once you travel dimensionally, you open up a door. And, sometimes you can end up going through that door even if you don't intend to. It sounds to me like she opened up a dimensional door at some point, and now it's open. So it seems to me she's leaving her body and being sucked through that door. If she wants to, she sharpens her will and makes sure that she's constantly thinking about how she's going to stay in this plane and see this person, not somebody else. Then she'll be able to do that again. That's probably what's happening.
Interesting. Kimby Mandolin says, is it dangerous in astral as far as other beings hurting you? Can someone do harm in the astral? And can you move objects when in astral?
Well, you can move astral objects. It's all physical objects are just. I mean, I remember once.
There was that case though with the pots and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
So there is
I was in my
some
kitchen
weird.
and I wanted to see if I could move something, so I just gathered all my energy and I just turned the dial on the oven just a little bit, and then I went back to my body and went into the kitchen, and yeah, I had moved it, but I was also so weak that I had to stay in bed that day and call out of work because I was just drained. You got to use a lot of energy to do that, but you can manipulate astral things at will. Um, but if there's any concerns about danger,
Harm or anything like that. Yeah, we go back to
same thing.
no,
We already
essentially.
covered that.
Yeah. Yeah. Samuel Migneal says, ask him if he is able to do things that most people can't do since his connection keep growing. Since I guess your connection is so strong and you're so professional at this, you have so much experience. And then he says, example, stop a candle burning, control, mind control. I guess you just provided an example of something you could do with the knob on your oven, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing you can do. You can do a lot in the astral, but you're basically interacting with astral people, astral things. Um, to actually manipulate things in the physical is very very difficult. Um, Very difficult.
Yeah. This is the last question. Abdul Qawli says, how to easily astral project, easiest method with one of those smiley face emojis with one of those sweat or the little thing coming down.
We've got this. I like to call it the Amazon generation. I remember in the old days, you had to go to a bookstore, and then if they didn't have the book, they'd order it. They'd call you in a couple of weeks, and then you go to the store, and then you get the book. Nowadays, they want it now, right now. And unfortunately, that's normally not the way a psychic talent works. It takes time to develop. The simplest way that Robert Bruce mentioned was to, think about astral projection as you're falling asleep. Set your timer, your alarm for like 6 hours. So you get up, use the bathroom, and now you're rested. So it's easier for the conscious mind to interact with the subconscious because as the conscious mind falls, the subconscious rises and takes over. That's what we call falling asleep. So when they meet, if you can exchange information there and then, that's ideal for astral projection. A lot of people go to sleep, they go to sleep very tired, and that makes it very hard to astral project consciously. So in this stage, 6 hours go by, and you get up, you do that, get rid of empty the bladder, and then you go back to sleep. But now you're not as tired, and many times people can project that way. Other times I mention is naps during the weekend. Sometimes you're generally not dead tired, so it's a little bit easier to do it then. Plus, I've noticed that during the daytime, people are less fearful uh, because there's something about the nighttime that our ancestors feared the night because that's when the predators came and then they had to worry about getting eaten. So there's still that buried, that fear is still there. So it's easier in that situation, the daytime, for instance. Those are some of the easier ways. Once again, it depends on the individual. I can't sit here and sell. I'm not going to sell you a bill of goods. I had one guy who offered me $1,000 if I could guarantee that I could let him project like within 24 hours. I told him to keep his money because I'm not going to promise that because I have no control. I can help educate you, but I can't control if you're ready. If your inner fears have been dealt with, I can't control that. And anybody who says they can is probably fibbing. Okay.
um, Rick, I guess, I mean, there are a bunch of other things, but this has been a nice
Yeah.
interview. I feel like this is a good amount of time. I don't want to keep you any longer. You've already spent so much time with me, which I appreciate so much.
Stuff. Hey, listen, no problem. Anything I can do to help you out.
That was great, Rick. That was so awesome. I appreciate you very much, man. Thank you.
Hey, anything I can do to help out.
Is anything you want to add here at the end? Anything at all?
I just think that what you really need to astral project is, first of all, the interest. If you're interested in astral projection, you're ready on some level. Because a lot of people aren't aware of astral projection, and there are plenty that just don't really want to do it. But if you're somebody who's interested and wants to do it, listening to Astral Club and YouTube and all the rest of that stuff and some other good channels, then you're ready. If you can just deal with whatever demons you've got to deal with, metaphorically, I'm talking here, hopefully not, you know, realistically, but then you'll be ready to do it. My only caution is if you start getting angry that it's not working for you, give yourself a break. Don't do anything for a period of weeks because your subconscious will sense that anger. It'll sense that negative emotion, and it'll think, "Oh, okay, I'm going to help you prevent this from happening now." So that's just my one caution: is if you start getting frustrated, give yourself a break for a few weeks, and then get at it again when you're better off emotionally speaking.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I owe you. Thank you so much. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you. And yeah, I hope you have a great day, Rick.
You
Thank
too,
you.
Nick. It's been a pleasure.